Blessed are the cheesemakers. Off in the distance, some stand listening to Jesus, but they're simply too far away to hear him clearly. Blessed are the cheesemakers, says one who has misunderstood Jesus. That's what he's saying. A woman standing there says, "What's so special about cheesemakers?" A third person chimes in, "Well, it's not meant to be taken literally. It refers to any manufacturer of dairy products." Now, some of you may, or some of you may not recognize this scene from Monty Python's Life of Brian. The humor comes from the fact that the characters in the story are mishearing what Jesus is saying, and then they try to make sense of what they are mishearing. We too are often like those characters in the Life of Brian. We too often mishear Jesus and then spend a lot of energy trying to make sense of what we have misheard. And this is no more true than in today's gospel reading. Blessed are the poor, the hungry, those who weep. And there are several ways that this has been misheard within the Christian tradition. Perhaps one of the most common ways of doing this is to spiritualize these sayings. Matthew is perhaps the first person to do this. Where Luke has blessed are the poor, Matthew has blessed are the poor in spirit. For Matthew, it seems that this blessing that Jesus is speaking of may or may not have anything to do with actual economic poverty. For Matthew, it seems like he's talking essentially about humility. Blessed are the poor, therefore, could be taken to refer to Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, providing they're humble, which of course is in debate. Spiritualizing can actually have the effect of erasing the original meaning. It makes difficult sayings easy and hard words banal. Blessed are the poor becomes blessed are the cheesemakers. Now, the Gospel of Luke, we're in year C in the lectionary, which means we're looking at the Gospel of Luke dominantly. More than any other gospel, the Gospel of Luke is concerned with actual economic conditions. So you're going to hear me talk a lot about actual economics as we follow the lectionary, because that's what Luke is doing. So, how are the poor blessed? Sometimes we can have a romantic notion of poverty. For example, we might imagine a loving family in a little wooden shack somewhere with a wood stove in the background, little in the way of material possessions, but much in the way of love. And while there are certainly examples of this in the real world, where those who are poor in possessions are very rich in things of the spirit, poverty is a problem. And to try and romanticize that problem away can lead us to a distorted view. Poverty can tear you apart. Imagine what a terrible thing it is to wonder as you wake up each day if you're going to have enough to feed your children, if you'll still have a house to live in on the next day. Poverty can be a soul crusher, it can destroy families. So again, we ask the question, how are the poor blessed? In what world is not having enough to eat or to provide for those you love a blessing? Now, of course, we all suffer lack in various ways. We all experience hunger in various ways, and we all cry. But not all of us experience these in the same way, to the same degree. Some suffer lack endemically. It's a basic fact of their existence. Like many of Jesus' sayings, there's a hidden depth. They invite you to think and sit with them. They're not going to be, they're like puzzles, but they're not puzzles that you simply solve and move on. They're puzzles you wrestle with for the whole of your life. And the more you wrestle, the more they give. So I'm not going to give you an easy answer because I don't think there is one to be had. But one thing I can say is his words often have very little to do with conventional morality. And his words often force us to think for ourselves. And this could be kind of disorienting. So what is Jesus saying here? Probably many things, too many to mention today. But one thing is certain, Jesus is again turning things upside down. Those things that we typically understand as good are rejected as not good, and those things that we typically desire to avoid are blessed. Jesus is changing the rules of the social game we play. The real winners of this game are those who, in the former set of rules, in the former game, were the losers. Jesus is inviting us to play an entirely different game, if you will. In the Hasbro's Game of Life, everyone knows the Game of Life, the common board game. At the end, the winner is the one with the most wealth. And this reflects quite nicely our culture's perspective on life and blessedness. So the game that Jesus is calling us to play is not Hasbro's Game of Life. So what are some of the features of this game that Jesus is calling us to play? Well, again, the winners are not the ones with the most wealth at the end of the game. Indeed, if we take Luke's sort of fearful, sober words, the ones with the most wealth at the end of the game are the losers. They are not blessed. They are cursed. This is pretty harsh, especially in a society such as ours, which worships the rich, but they are not the blessed. So in this new game, we cannot conclude that someone is a loser because they have shabby clothes or drive an old car or an old bike or old shoes or what have you. The winners are those who are at the bottom of the current game. I like the Canucks, although I haven't been watching them recently. It's a little discouraging. But when they win, we like to celebrate. We can, in the arena, if you happen to see a live game, it can be quite enthusiastic. What would it be like if we were to celebrate those who are blessed in Jesus' perspective? It would be a very different thing indeed. Final thought. It can be uncomfortable, and I think rightfully so, because that's what Jesus' words are meant to be, uncomfortable sometimes, but it can be uncomfortable speaking about those who are poor as blessed when we look at ourselves and do not consider ourselves poor. What do we do with that? And sometimes, again, it's okay to be a little uncomfortable. Leaning into this discomfort, as I reflect upon the words, blessed are the poor, is a way of reminding ourselves that hardcore realities are important to Jesus, and they should be important to us. And we should never let something as trifling as personal discomfort make them unimportant to us. We should never let something as inconsequential as our discomfort over our own wealth and privilege keep us from learning this new game that Jesus wants us to play. So let us truly open our hearts to the suffering of the world, including the suffering caused by economic lack. May our hearts be fully open. May we let ourselves feel the pain of the mother who does not have enough to feed her children. Let our hearts experience the world as it really is. And once we have felt the pain of the world, I hope we can trust our compassion to figure out what to do next. Amen.